in a day and age where the world feels crazier than ever, arguably because the world feels smaller than ever with technology what it is, and only continuing to increase in its developments as it has for many, many decades and centuries. The progression of technology is a very good thing. We create jobs, we increase intelligence and knowledge and understanding, but of course with that there's also a downside in the sense that we know more about the brokenness of our world. We know more about everybody around us and what they're doing day in and day out. It can become more of a challenge to not compare ourselves to one another or feel like we need to keep up with certain expectations. So it can be really different to pursue a slow, simple lifestyle. I constantly find myself caught in this tension of wanting room for boredom or space available to welcome interruptions, and then the desire to do more, wanting to experience this full, fun life, especially with children who are now 2 and 4 years old. They're kind of at this age where they can really enjoy things, and I just keep thinking they will not be this little and they will not be this interested in spending time with me forever. So I'm trying to soak this up, but also trying not to pack every single moment of our calendar and our lives full of activities, because I find it much easier to instill qualities in them and incorporate subtle disciplines and habits kind of into their daily schedules right now when we move at a slower pace overall. Our hope is that these habits are intentional and that they show them the benefits of working hard and having productive property around our home, spending time in the kitchen, taking care of the people that we love, all these good things. We are a Christian family, so in all of this, Jesus is at the forefront. He is at the very center of each and everything that we do. I will go ahead and just open this video with that and say, first off, this is one of the biggest things that I believe helps me to discern what we should say yes and no to, but that does not mean that it makes everything an easy decision. So with that being said, today I just kind of want to go through some of the ways that we strive to live slowly as a family, as I show you a bit of how our summer has looked here in our North Georgia cottage. As I've picked up my camera on random occasions over the last month or so, I realized that none of this really was enough to make like its own video, but after putting several of the clips together, they did seem to have a very cohesive theme. It all felt very similar to me, and once I got it together, I thought, wow, this was such an accurate picture of how our summer has went. I'm so grateful that we had this time to spend focusing on the things within our home and just allowing the Lord to really pour into us, so that we could then overflow to the people around us in our community and our family and into the places that we've been called during the school year, you know, just in various aspects of our lives all year round really, but in particular going into the school year, this is kind of what's been on my mind. So again, I just want to clarify that I do not think a simple lifestyle is ever easy or perfect. Never. No circumstances. I don't think any family ever has it 100% all the time. We certainly do not. However, one of the things I think that has made it far more possible for us is by me being able to stay home full time. And when I say stay home full time, I mean mostly full time. I teach half day at our daughter's preschool during the school year, so it tracks with the calendar set by our local school system, and that means that we start school right after Labor Day and we run up until right before Memorial Day. Then we have the summer where we are fully at home. However, I think for us, that schedule feels so much like a full-time stay-at-home schedule, partially because it is a half-day program. And I just want to clarify that we mostly stay home full-time, and if ever something was to happen, or like whenever my girls age out of the preschool, we will most likely homeschool. At least that's where we're leaning right now. So I consider us full-time, stay home, and I think that is such a huge reason why it is more doable for us to have a simple lifestyle. I mean, looking back, I can remember working full-time. I worked in the workforce after college for many years. I believe it was around 6 years. And part of that time I was in an office, part of the time I was in full-time ministry, and part of the time I worked from home doing auditing full-time. I transitioned to the work from home job after our oldest daughter was born. She was still in daycare for very, very long days because the work that I was doing while I was home was extremely tedious, very detail-oriented. I had to be extremely focused and could not make many mistakes. All of my audits were also being audited, so it really wasn't an option for me to keep her home during that time. But even if I had tried to, I would not have been able to give her any attention. So it was much harder to focus on things that obviously I wanted to focus on whenever such a huge chunk of my time was being committed to a workplace in a 40-hour week or 60-hour week, whatever it looked like at the time. But there were definitely elements that, especially looking back in hindsight, I can see we were already kind of working on some of these disciplines of a slow lifestyle. And while it was much harder because the evening felt like a rush, by the time I got off work and my husband got home from work and I was trying to pick up our daughter from daycare, get home, cook dinner, do bath time, do bedtime, and then spend a little bit of, chill time with my husband, it just felt so much more rushed. But after you kind of have more than one kid and get a few seasons ahead of that, looking back, it's like, wow, we really had so much time back then. And in the moment, of course, it still does not feel that way. It's always in hindsight where we think that. But I can still recall the feeling of never feeling caught up, or just feeling as though all my days were spent running from one place to another, constantly trying to take care of everyone and everything, and just never being able to do that as well as I would have hoped. So now, being where we currently are, I can fully appreciate and recognize that I'm so incredibly blessed to have the opportunity to stay home full time. And I know that is not an opportunity that everybody gets, nor is it an opportunity that everybody wants. The most popular video that I've ever shared on YouTube was about how we make it on a single income in today's economy. And I'll have that linked here on the screen if you want to go watch, because I won't get into all the details right now of how we do it. I will just say that if you are wanting that, if you are hoping and praying for that, I hope that video serves as an encouragement to you, because I hoped and prayed for it for a long time and eventually had to accept that it might not ever happen. But here I am over 2 years into doing this, being able to say that God made a way, and I truly hope that He does for you too. So along with being home full time, our property has really encouraged me to slow down because it requires a decent amount of attention. We have chickens, we have a garden. We actually expanded our garden this year to something that's really kind of substantial. I mean, it's still not anywhere near enough to provide us food through the winter, but it is certainly something that takes a good bit of my time. And of course, it's absolutely not necessary that we grow our own food in this day and age, but I do think that there's such a value in it for obvious reasons, like nutrients and lack of chemicals in comparison to how store-bought items are produced, but even just understanding and growing those skills of how to sustain ourselves, I feel it's very beneficial for a number of reasons, and it just helps us to better understand, better appreciate the world in which we live. And then, of course, if we ever were to need that as a skill set, we wouldn't have to worry about learning it in the midst of a crisis. But my husband does more with taking care of the chickens than I do. That's kind of his thing. My thing's the garden. I'll check for eggs, let them out to free range, and help put them up at night. But he does a lot of the coop cleaning and that type of stuff. We would like to add chicken tractors in the near future. We only live on 1 acre, so it's just a matter of trying to figure out where would be best to put those right now. But either way, we are certainly interested in continuing to pursue the homestead side of things, whatever that may look like. Down the road, we would love to have a farm or at least more acreage, but in the meantime, we are working with what we have and learning. We are learning a lot, and the learning curve is steep, but I feel like this year, especially in the garden, it's given us such great repetitive exposure to the processes of how to harvest, how to preserve, how to freeze, cook, and prepare. So really in this season, where we're just all the extracurricular work we have created for ourselves takes up a large chunk of our days. And I guess that's what it is, really, that whenever the things taking up the majority of your time are things that feel like they're bringing you back to a simpler, more old-fashioned lifestyle, at least for me, that's what makes me feel like I have a slow, simple, enjoyable life. I love traveling and I love vacations, but that's not really where I find myself feeling like I am the most at peace or even like I'm the most rested. Maybe I'm the outlier on that, but oftentimes when we come home from a trip, I feel like, okay, now I need a vacation from my vacation, or time at home to get back into our groove before whatever happens next. Personally, for me, it's more so when I get into this rhythm in my everyday life of knowing what I'm doing and enjoying the things that people have done for generations and generations. And sure, I think they've been lost a little bit in the last couple generations, but it really does seem like now there's this revival happening where we are starting to bring a lot of that back. So being able to stay home full time is a big deal when it comes to living simply. The work which we allow to occupy our time is a big part of it as well. And then of course, I think the kinds of hobbies that we choose, they help to keep life feeling slow, depending on the ones that we choose, of course. So even if we spent a whole day at the creek fishing, or we stayed busy driving through the mountains, for us, it would still feel more restful than if we were to go out on the town or take some big adventure. Not to say that we don't enjoy those things sometimes, but overall, we tend to incorporate slower fun into everyday life, and that really helps it to feel peaceful for us. If you saw me set up my sewing corner in the video from a few weeks ago, then you already know this. But one of my very favorite hobbies that I'm trying to get back into, now that my girls are a bit older and they can kind of play amongst themselves while I work on things that are productive, yes, but not necessarily necessary, that is sewing, and specifically quilting. So a few weeks ago, we went to pick up some fabric from the craft store for a completely unrelated task. And I could not find the fabric that I wanted, but as I was looking around, my almost 4-year-old was also looking. Little did I know, Rosemary found some princess fabric that she really liked, and she just really thought we should get it. So I was like, well, what are we going to do with that? Like, why would we? What's our purpose in buying that? And she just with no hesitation, looked up at me with her big green eyes and said, well, you could make me a blanket. And so, of course, in response, with zero hesitation, I said, well, yes, you're absolutely right. I could. Let's do it. Her birthday is actually this upcoming weekend, so I thought, what a perfect opportunity for me to get to re-enter this quilting world, sharpen up those skills, continue to grow in them, and also for her to have a sweet little present, which it just melts my heart that she wanted that, because I've made my girls quilts before, but it has never been something that they've actually requested. Like, they've kind of grasped as like, oh, I want this, and mommy can actually make it, and I want her to make it for me. So that was just a sweet moment for me, and I hope that that is an encouragement for any of you that might be moms of littles, and you're just constantly hearing, oh, just wait until they're this or that, as if it's only going to get worse from here. I hope that this little story of this little moment will be an encouragement that there really are fun and precious moments as our babies get bigger. Sure, there are some challenges, but there's so many beautiful parts to each stage of their little lives. But anyways, I've had many people ask things over the last several years, like, is it easy to make a quilt, or is quilting worth it? And I started to get into the details of that here in this video, but then I realized I'm probably going to need to make a completely separate video for that single question and call it something along the lines of, is quilting worth my time? Simply because there are so many things that go into answering those questions, and I'm by no means an expert quilter. I'm still such a beginner, actually, but for this video I just want to express how much I love this hobby, because it brings me back to a simpler time. It takes me back to Laura Ingalls, and it takes me back to when my grandmother talks about her childhood and how summer evenings were spent out in the field working until dark, but in the winter, when the days got shorter, all the women would sit around inside and work on a quilt together, or knit, or work on embroidery. And I just love that, whether it's being completed for the sake of actually keeping my family warm, or if it's giving my children something to hold on to long after I'm gone, hopefully, and potentially passed down to their children and grandchildren, or if it's just simply fulfilling a creative space that I have in my own mind and heart and want to accomplish. It kind of gives me that outlet. I just feel like it is such a valuable way to spend time. And there are many hobbies like that. I'm not saying quilting is the only one that can help you to accomplish a simple lifestyle, but I think when our work and our hobbies both tie us back to simplicity and intentionality, that's where a beautiful collision happens, and it just brings us to a place where it is much easier to instill this ongoing ease in our hearts and in our minds, and to not feel like we are always being pulled by the rush of the world. So speaking of the Ingalls family, I just wanted to finish with this sweet little quote from Laura Ingalls Wilder, which says, "The real things have not changed. It's still best to be honest and truthful, to make the most of what we have, to be happy with simple pleasures, and have courage when things go wrong." And I think that's a lot easier said than done, but I hope that as we put on our boots, tie our apron strings, and try to gain a little more contentment with each day, it gives us a better sense of grounding and a better sense of clarity and perspective, kind of on what the world should be about. To me, it should be about loving the Lord and loving the people around us, trusting that everything else is going to fall into place. I mean, the Bible says when we seek first His righteousness and the kingdom of God, then all the rest will be added to us. And so I pray that this is the lifestyle lived by my family, by my household, and maybe it could be that the Lord is at the root of simple living. I pray this is something that encourages you and helps you to feel like a bit of the load has been lifted and like we don't have to do all the things. We could do all the self-care in the world, go on all the vacations that money could afford, have all of the spa days and the most luxurious treatments. And while I am such a fan of that stuff, for most people, and definitely for us, it's just not a sustainable lifestyle. But even if it was, I dare say it would not be enough. There would still be a void. So these are some things that I find to be extremely helpful for me, extremely practical for our specific circumstances, and I hope that it's something you can find encouraging as well. Thanks so much for being here. I hope that you have enjoyed this, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you're at. I'll catch you next time. Bye, guys.